Informal chat today, guys. Bathroom for the men's is out near where the desk was, and the women's is just there. And Slido, just ask some questions on there. You don't need to download anything. You just go there, enter that hashtag, and start asking your questions. Paul, thanks for coming. Mate, I usually go back and ask the question about the background. I go a little bit back. I usually start with the question, was there a mother or father that was an entrepreneur? 9 times out of 10, it's a no.
Define entrepreneur.
Just a hustler, I guess. Yeah. I would say a hustler.
A hustler.
Yeah. I think my dad was an entrepreneur, but he didn't have his own company.
I tell you what, my father, probably like me, was someone who worked for entrepreneurs and helped them be successful. So you hear stories of the kids who, and this is probably where the question comes from, you hear stories of the kids who were running a lemonade stand or who were selling their father's ties or were doing all that kind of stuff at school. That wasn't me, and it also wasn't me through my career. But I was always the guy who helped those crazy people be successful. And this is very sort of prime therapy. I never really thought that was my dad.
Yeah, we'll go deeper. Yeah. So what do you mean by helping the other kids? You're right. Usually we have like someone that was selling baseball cards or whatever, they have their own moment. But you were doing what?
So there were two things. When the guy would get told that they're an idiot, would say they're not an idiot. But when the guy was an idiot, would say, you're being an idiot. But might be how it could work. So I was not the guy who started the idea, right?
Yeah.
So, but when the idea was there and there was enthusiasm to be mustered and there was defence to be created and there were sort of, things to get done, I was pretty good at that.
I'm picturing you at primary school now, but this doesn't make sense. So,
no, this is probably your high school, uni.
High school.
Yeah, primary school was about, playing marbles or whatever.
Yeah. I saw you had one of those.
The fidget spinners. There's a sponsored fidget spinner. I recommend anyone who wants their hands free ever again, don't get one.
Really?
Yeah. They're very addictive. I'm gripping the chair because I'm sort of missing it already.
I think it's probably better than smoking, but almost as addictive.
No comment.
No comment. Moving forward to your education, what was the education and was it helpful?
I am a product of the Melbourne private school system. I want to make a comment on that because that is a divisive comment. Melbourne is a private school, public school. If you went to the right school, we are kind of famous for that kind of thing. And it comes up a lot, and I've had people, we run an internship program and we actually opened for interns for the second half of this year. So if you're out there, probably at university, and want to come in for a couple of days a week at Rampersand, please get in touch.
These people have jobs.
No, this is for the camera.
Okay.
And we've had a lot of discussion. We hear it, like we've heard people say they won't fund founders who come out of the private school system. And I tell a story when
I was private school.
Yeah, they won't. So they're biased against private schools because the sense is that kids who come out of private schools are kind of overly pampered, not hungry enough. Now I resent that terribly. I went to a very good private school in Melbourne, and my network of friends, everyone from scholarship kids to ones whose parents did 2 jobs, and I was very fortunate to be there. And there's the whole range to kids of multimillionaires and everything there. And I can't tell you that there was not a linear relationship between the kids who grew up with lots of money and the kids who had hunger. It wasn't necessarily a relationship. And I remember when I was going for my first job and I started life in advertising. I went to an ad agency and the guy said to me, I don't give jobs to kids who've come out of private schools, or this particular private school, Scotch College. And I said, why not? He said, well, you're not hungry enough. And I went straight down to the McDonald's around the corner and bought 2 Big Macs, and I put them in a bag and I put them on a sign that said, are you hungry? Yeah, I am too. And marched back into that agency and sort of plonked it on his desk. And he rang me that afternoon and said, we want you to come in for an interview. And I said, I'm not coming back into the interview because I was too bloody proud at that point. But stereotypes aren't very helpful. So for me, your question was education helpful? I did Melbourne private schools. I learnt the power of hard work through the people around me of all walks of life. That there was no ceiling. I was at school with kids of captains of industry, kids of politicians, kids of foremen of factories. There was no ceiling, there was no floor. It was whatever you made it. I went on and did a marketing degree, a business degree in marketing at Monash here in Melbourne. And this is how old I am. There was no internet when I was at uni.
You went to the library.
We went to the library, and we had discs, and I graduated in the sort of mid-90s, and I said to we had a couple of electives, and I said to the head of the course, you could choose what subject you want to do, and I went to the head of the course and I said, I might be crazy, but I think this internet thing which is taking off might impact marketing in some way. And he looked at me, and I felt like, have I missed? Like, am I? And he goes, I think you might be right, but there's no one here to teach that.
Yeah.
So that was sort of. So I was there, sort of, saw that, and the how do I put this right? Doing a degree is fantastic. Now I think we're much more aware of the fact that learning for the sake of learning is really important. We know that our kids are going to school now are not going to be learning the jobs that they come out of school to do, because those jobs probably don't exist yet. And I now, as I get older, have a much greater respect for just the act and the art of learning. So I think I probably did too much of a focused degree. I would much rather go back and do psychology or philosophy or probably sociology, something that actually opens up that mind and the ability to think. But I think it's fair to say I was fairly driven to get to where I wanted to get to.
Marketing is good, nothing wrong with it.
Very good, but it's very practical. Well, in fact, not practical enough in its application. It was very theoretical, manifesting as practical.
So what you said, advertising,
Whatever.
We'll quote it. So out of school, went into advertising.
I went into advertising.
What kind of role?
As a suit. I was an account manager. And I was really frustrated. And I loved it. It was amazing. My first job we launched Nintendo 64 in Australia, and so I was not a gamer. I, of course, am not a gamer still. But I was for a couple of weeks, and that first 2 weeks of my job was literally like in a room playing all the new games. I had to get to know them to be able to brief our creative teams on how to launch these games. So
that sounds a lot better than the product manager of the dog food company.
It was.
Has to eat dog food. Yeah.
You have to eat your own dog food. Yeah. No, it was a good job. It was a good job. But I was frustrated because I was, like a lot of people, I was 21 and I knew everything. I knew much more then than I know now. And in the ad agency world, and it's still a little bit like this, though it's changing. You sort of, when you're an account manager, the client comes in and they give you the brief, and it's like handing over pieces of paper, and then I take that piece of paper and hand it to the creative, and then hand it to the strategic guys, and hand it to the media guys. It was very, very compartmentalised, and they said I knew everything, right? So I was smarter than everyone else, and I was really frustrated. Why couldn't I do all of their jobs as well? And kind of dawned on me pretty quickly that they were actually much better than me, but it took me a while to learn that. But what I didn't like was this very compartmentalised way of doing work, and then someone came out of PR and said, why don't you come into public relations? I was like, I don't know what that is. And they said, well, you know how you're really frustrated that you don't get to do all those things, go into PR and you get to do all those things. And it coincided with sort of dot-com boom one. As I was working for a multinational PR agency, and I was the young guy who had some thought at least about the internet and what that all meant. And so I set up a tech division for the PR agency at like age 23. Was given a lot of responsibility, and we were working for Telstra down to local ISPs, down to, with startups, and it was like, that was just mind-blowing. And the lesson I learned out of that process, and I don't know if there's anyone in the room who remembers back then, but there was kind of a boom and then pretty bad bust. It got a lot of publicity. And PR agencies really caught the whack of it because there wasn't enough money going around for big ad spends, and PR was really quite cheap. So it was what all the startups were doing. Was first thing you had to do was go and get a PR agency. They were making lots of money, but a lot of the startups didn't have any money, so they were paying in options. And so all these PR people were driving around, telling their stories. So I've got, and on paper they were worth squillions. And I've probably implied that I was fairly proud back then, and I was too proud to ask people what options were. So I didn't know what they were. So when people offered them, I said, no, I don't know what they are. We'll just take cash. And so we actually got paid in cash. And so when the crash came, and all these people who were paper millionaires were now no longer, we just sort of kept on with steady business. So it was an interesting lesson to learn.
Was that still in Australia at this point?
They're still in Australia, yeah.
So the move from advertising to PR, then what's next? It was a bit of travel. Yeah?
So then I went to London for no particular reason apart from I was in my mid-20s or getting to late 20s and I didn't want to stay in Melbourne for the rest of my life. I didn't want to get to the end and think, this is it. You know, I sort of had this idea that over the next period of time, what happened is I was offered partnership of this new PR agency that had been set up that I'd gone to join, and I sort of said, that's a 5-year commitment, and you know, I'm not this kind of planned out person, but I sort of thought I'll probably have a wife and potentially kids, and that's Melbourne for the rest of my life, and I don't want to be that person. I want to go and explore, so I just got on a plane and actually went to New York and LA and ended up in London. And this is 2003, and so tech was sort of back up again, and all the jobs in the UK in communications were tech, so I ended up running a division of a tech PR agency, or strategic comms agency, with a really good European footprint, so working with, again, big telcos down to startups, and my big favourite was startups. You know, the thing that I learned about myself, and there are a lot of people who like working with big brands, and big brands are fantastic because when you're in the marketing PR world, they open up doors. You know, if you're trying to pitch a journalist on a story, in those days we still had paid journalists and vibrant media. And you know, if you ring up and say, hey, I'm from, you know, as I was working for O2, which is the big mobile operator, so Telstra, you know, people are going to take your call. If you say, I'm there from XYZ startup, never heard of, it's a much harder life. But on the flip side, everything you do makes a difference. If you're advising a small company and you're advising a fast growth startup, and you're working directly with the founders, and these people have a view that the world is going to change and they're going to have a role in changing it. For me, that was really exciting. That was the thing that I really enjoyed. So I really gravitated towards particularly the early stage founders, the early stage startups, and the challenges that they had. And the really good news for me is that the people who are coming out of the tech world who are really good at building great product are often really shit at describing it, and they're prepared to pay for people who are good at it. So
that was you.
So that was me, and that was really lucky. That was really good. And so I was in London. I married an English woman.
So that backfired.
Yeah,
Melbourne bit. Yeah.
I love English women, particularly my wife. Still married. We had a kid in London, and I was there for 5 years. And so by the end of that 5 years, I had this kid, and I said, I just said I love English people. I didn't want to raise a pom, to be honest. No, I wanted to. London in particular is a place for, generally a place for really rich or really poor people, and I was kind of neither. And I wanted my son to have the sort of amazing life that I had growing up. And Melbourne is, I've travelled fairly extensively, and as I'm sure a lot of people in the room have, and Melbourne is an amazing place. You know, lifestyle here is as good as anywhere in the world, and I wanted my kid to have that. Right? And so we're planning to leave London. We actually had a place to stay in Melbourne. We're all settled, and then I quit my job, and one of my clients was a Silicon Valley startup, and they said, if you're leaving London, don't go home, go halfway home, come to California. And those who've sort of lived and worked in America understand that their view of global geography is a little bit warped. So it doesn't quite work, but it kind of worked from a career trajectory. So like, come to Silicon Valley and be our global head of marketing for this business. We're backed by one of the big VCs out of the Valley. Amazing company, very early in the mobile voice over IP space. It was called Jar Jar.
Jar Jar, yeah, the first one.
And they had 2 Austrian founders, an Irish CEO, Silicon Valley money, and Israeli R&D. And so it was like this melting pot of cultures. And so bear in mind, I have a 6-month-old son and a wife on maternity leave who thinks we're moving to Melbourne. And I got offered a job in California. And so and it literally happened like this. I went home that night and said, funny thing happened today. Got this job in California.
Think we should go?
No, the opposite. I said I don't think, because we were really talking about putting down roots in Melbourne. I was really excited to rescue my wife and son.
Convince your wife on that.
Yeah.
On that one.
Yep. So Melbourne's a pretty easy sell, but yeah, it's been a while, and she looked at me and she said, "I think you really want this, don't you?" I was like, I want to do, raise our family, do that thing. And she's like, nah, you really want it, don't you? And I said, yeah, I can do. And she's like, great, let's do it. And so literally 10 days later, I'm in California.
Right.
And came back and got her and packed up the house and got my visa and moved back again.
What time? What year? Was
2007.
2007. So you
Yeah.
come to the Valley. Well, you were in the Valley or in San
2007,
Francisco?
In the Valley, in Mountain
In the
View.
Valley, yep, Mountain View.
So we were on, Jar Jar was on East Charleston Road, if anyone knows the Valley. So there's one big company called Google, which is also they're on West Charleston. So the big highway that runs down the valley is 101. We were on either side of we're kind of this big, and Google was kind of this big.
Yep. And Jar Jar was a successful business.
Jar Jar was a successful business. Jar Jar had a really successful outcome. So 2 years later, we sold Jar Jar for I think about $300 million to Telefonica, a big European telco. I learnt so many lessons, and apart from the fact I'd come from a sort of agency advisor land to go inside a company, and if I thought, the story I said before about being able to influence a company, that was from an outside perspective. Going inside the company, it just magnifies extensively, and so many lessons of accountability, of actually, when you're a consultant, your whole life is sort of going back and asking for permission. When you're in a startup, you're just like, fuck it, let's go. And we had so many decisions that had to be made constantly, and I sort of learnt to stop looking over my shoulder and ask for approval. Just like, I had to make judgment calls, and just started to see much better what the life of a founder is like. And our founders were amazing. It's an amazing engineer, an amazing sort of product guy. CEO was a great salesman. It was how do we pull that together into this great organisation that's going to be able to, and a lot of my thesis around how to build a startup are really based on this early experience and how we've applied it to other companies. It was really about how do we do two things at once? How do we grow the ability for that organisation to sell more product? So we actually went to my time with Jar Jar, which was, including as a consultant to an exit, was about 5 years. We started life as a free international calling service. Right? So this is, today it sounds ridiculous, but Skype was really in its infancy, and people were at home kind of with these big ugly headphones on attached to their computer making phone calls, and mobile phones. We didn't have iPhone or anything, but we had mobile phones. We had Nokia. I was like, well, hang on, we've got this amazing thing that's good for making phone calls. People kind of like using it. Why are we tethered to the computer with this cord, and that's what you can do? And so these guys kind of pioneered putting the cost, so free calls, the cost of voice over IP onto a mobile device, so all the efficiency and with all the cost. And there's a lot of back-end stuff. It was really a lot of sort of telco tricks. And that went really well. We got that business to about 10 million active users, which today doesn't sound so amazing. In those days was really impressive.
Let me stop you there. Given the audience, right? Are you happy to talk about some of the tactical stuff rather than we got there at 10?
Yeah, I'm trying to go think back, but
just some of the lessons learned.
I'll tell you what we learned, what we did. There's a few things. Those calls were not free. The calls, because Skype can be free because it's pure IP call or P2P calling. So people who are technical or more technical with me will call me up on it. But it's just using the IP backbone, there's no cost for that. When you're actually getting out to a mobile phone, it's actually a cost because you've got to pay a telco to originate the call and to terminate the call. And the way we thought about it fundamentally changed and created the opportunity to build this business. The way we thought about that cost was that it was a marketing expense. So he said, we're not going to have a marketing budget per se. What we're going to do is put the millions of dollars effectively that we're going into. So we had to crank the hell out of this viral engine because people were able to make free phone calls from their mobile phone. So that was really good. So it was a lot of lessons learned around finding out who that audience is, what are their spheres of influence. We did a lot of ethnic and communal marketing. We did a lot of disruptive marketing in terms of, we'll gate crash the big events in the valley and, put big sort of head. I remember one day we had this huge mascot and just ran through, I think it was the TechCrunch conference or the Gigaome conference or one of them. I just we never asked for permission for anything. It was always forgiveness. And it was a bit of a learning curve for me as well, right? Because I love that. That's absolutely in my DNA. But you kind of learned as a consultant to do things the right way. It's like, what, we're going to do it if we. So we ended up doing things, a lot of hacking on a product level. So we did things like. We kind of broke the Twitter terms of service when Twitter was really, it was young, but it was king. So we created the world's first Twitter phone call. Right, so you could actually, we created this account, it was @call, And if you just @call @Chris, and we had our phone numbers attached to our accounts, we could originate a call through Twitter. It doesn't sound that amazing, but the headline's bloody awesome, like Twitter calling. We did the same thing for Facebook. We somehow convinced Intel to open up a port on one of their chipsets that enabled, if it was done the right way, for hang on, what happens to the video here? Who sees this video?
All the people you don't want to, really, like they're all going to just be sitting home waiting for it. No,
okay.
I mean, like,
turn the cameras off for a second. So I mean, it really wasn't an amazing breakthrough, but it was a pretty interesting one. And we managed to, everything we did, we absolutely beat the pavement on making noise about it. So we said, world's first phone call on a chip was how we called that, right? And I actually remember, I was pretty proud of that. We got so we launched it. We got publicity. It was the Wall Street Journal. It was in the Financial Times. It was we got global kind of pretty big coverage for it. And I got a call from the Intel marketing person saying, "Can you please turn the coverage off because we don't get this kind of coverage for a chipset release." Like, it was really minor. And the lesson, I sort of say it with a bit of tongue in cheek, but the lesson was, we had so little at our disposal. We had to really make it work very hard. PR today is very different. Back then the media was very, very influential. It still is. We didn't have all the owned channels that we've got today. But the mentality is still the same, right? It was still like, nothing will come that you don't fight for. We're scrappers, we're fighters. We made every post really, really massively count. We're never, ever satisfied that we're making the most out of something. So I can't tell you, I rewrote press releases 15, 20 times, because we would sit in the room, the two founders, the CEO and the head of sales and me, and go, how do we get it better? How do we get it better? How do we be more aggressive? How do we be cheekier? How do we be more disruptive? I had IBM call me and tell me to put, because we did a thing with IBM for it must be the 2004 Olympics. Was that Beijing? Or 2004?
Athens.
Athens, no, it was for Beijing. When was Beijing? 2008 maybe? 2008. So we did a thing where we used the IBM voice recognition engine, and if you were a tourist, an American tourist going to China with no language, you would ring this number, say what you wanted to say, it would sort of replay back a translated version of that message. So you could hold your phone out to the cab driver, for example, the person on the street, so you could be understood. So it's a pretty rudimentary kind of translation piece. But again, 2008, it's a long time ago. It was pretty interesting. So we PR'd the crap out of it, and we got tons and tons of coverage, and it turns out we kind of forgot to ask IBM for permission for that. They were quite upset, I'll put it that way. But the lessons were, we did a lot of exploration around segmentation and targeting, message testing. So we're sort of, A/B testing wasn't really kind of a renowned thing, or at least not in my world it wasn't. We were doing a lot of that stuff, like just trial, test and progress. And really, but it's the aggression. It was the aggression of making everything work.
very cool. So, successful exit. Happy days when you came home that night? Or were you part with... Yeah, that smile, still smile.
No, it was good.
Yeah.
It was good. I didn't own enough of the business, obviously,
Yeah.
just being a worker drone. But it was amazing. The feeling of pulling together for an exit, and when you're working for a venture-backed startup, there is one outcome you're aiming for, and that's an exit. Whether that's an IPO or a trade sale, it's an exit. That your investors are expecting an outcome, and so you're kind of working towards a long-term goal, and you don't know how long-term that goal is. It's largely outside of your control. Right? If you're going to do a trade sale, companies tend to get bought, not sold. Like you can only run a process so much and try and sell the business, right?
That's never happened. Honestly, it never happened.
Never demo live tech.
There you go.
And to have a team, it was a small team. It was about 25 or 30 of us. Even by the time we exited in Mountain View, there was close to 100 in Israel. But and we worked together pretty hard for that outcome. And there's a lot of false dawns. A lot of people come knocking. A lot of big companies that wanted to buy the company, and we couldn't get the deals done for one reason or another. So yeah, that was a pretty good week or two.
And so, what happens next? Are you trying to line something up? Do people start taking their eye off the ball when there's a
Post-exit?
or even knowing that you're going to be bought? Like,
No, you don't know you're going to be bought until you're bought. I mean, the deal is not done until it's done, is what I mean. Like you think it's coming, but I've seen deals from term sheet, deals from completion, deals signed but not money in the bank, things fall over, more often than they don't. Right? So no one had the view that it was done until it was done. It's a really interesting culture in the Valley because you've got a lot of people who have got everyone's got employee options, and depending on where you are in your period in your tenure, is how many of those options have that have matured, that you've actually they've vested. And so you've got a bit of a spectrum. So the new joiners have not got their full allocation, so they're kind of to some extent less excited about an exit because they're not going to make the kind of money that the early joiners have got. The early joiners have got more options, but they've also vested more at a lower valuation. So there's a real spectrum. So there's a real HR challenge. And then there's the question of retention from the acquiring companies. So who do they want to stay on? And one of the bad news stories is, for me, the marketing guy, we had taken Jar Jar from a sort of direct-to-consumer business to a white label back-end platform because we've actually recognised, that was a really interesting journey itself, was recognising there were a few things that we did really well. Consumer marketing was one of them, but it was only one of them. There were a whole lot of other things. So actually we got to learn sort of consumer marketing, but also platformificating a technology and doing the business-to-business piece. And it kind of I was not a necessary retention point. They didn't need to, the acquiring company didn't need to keep me, nor did I necessarily want to work for a Spanish telco whilst in Silicon Valley. It kind of wasn't what I went there to do.
Halfway to Melbourne.
It was halfway to Melbourne. That's right. So I was in sort of a fortunate, awkward position where what did I want to do and what did my family want to do? And I was really lucky because Jar Jar wanted to keep me on. Telefonica let Jar Jar be relatively autonomous for quite a long period of time. So I did have a retention there, but I also had the autonomy to kind of do other stuff. And so the other stuff for me was we'd gone to the Valley to do what we wanted to do. My wife very much wanted to have, we had 2 kids under 18 months by this stage, wanted a bit more support. So we're packing up boxes. This is kind of a familiar story. We're packing up boxes, ready to move to Melbourne, when one of the partners at one of the VC funds I knew rang and said, hey, here you got a bit of time, did a pretty good job with Jar Jar, can you join one of these other companies? I'm like, we're kind of packing boxes to go to Melbourne. He's like, where's Melbourne? It's like, it's not a good start. It's in Australia, blah, blah, blah. So this company's in Tel Aviv. Okay, well, is it all right if I sort of move with my family back to Melbourne and I'll just come back and we'll sort it out? And I go, well, frankly, we don't care where in the world you are, if they don't care where in the world you are. So kind of moved the family back to Melbourne, and I did fly in, fly out to Tel Aviv and San Francisco for the next 12 months.
Right, fun.
Which was awesome fun. Which is really, genuinely awesome fun.
Yeah.
Because I got the best of both worlds. I get to come back to Melbourne, see my family, see my friends, go to the footy, and then go and work in 2 of the most exciting technology ecosystems in the world with amazing people and learning tons every day and doing great things. So this was a business called Snap2, which was very early in the, it was in some mobile apps infrastructure, let's call that. And Facebook ended up buying that company. So,
Happy days again.
That was pretty good.
Yep.
That was pretty good. That was a year and 10 days after I joined the company, and I know that because that's exactly according to my vesting schedule.
Yeah. So you only got a quarter.
The lesson
quarter of the shares.
Correct. So there's a big lesson there. So
what's the lesson?
This is quite sharing, isn't it? The big lesson is if you kind of fly in, fly out, and in fact, in kind of any circumstance, try and negotiate an accelerated vest. So there is this kind of concept that if you typically got your 4-year vesting schedule for your options, but it doesn't have to be. If you're a reasonable negotiator, you should be able to find circumstances where it's an accelerated vest. Because Facebook certainly didn't need me, right? There was no role, there was no retention, so I should have had an accelerated vest, but I wasn't good enough to negotiate it.
That's good. Love getting these little bits. That's what we need to take away.
These are all founders; they're not employees. But this is good to know for your people.
Yeah. How to not offer that.
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily in. Yeah, that's true. No, it's more the acquiring company who's got to deal with that. It's not the founders, right?
But Facebook, right? Interesting acquisition, I imagine. Yeah. Were you part of the deal?
I wasn't as close to that process, not being based in Israel permanently. I can tell you that one of the interesting phenomena about that. So this business Snap2. I'm the sort of PR and comms guy for it, and we're working to basically work with a lot of the content owners and the publishers to bring their content onto a data light device. So a lot for the emerging world, for for non-smartphones, as smartphones were taking off, for non-smartphones, low bandwidth networks in the emerging world mostly, but also across the US. And so we had deals with BBC, with ESPN, with LinkedIn, and then Facebook. And pretty much, it's not quite as linear as this, but just from a negotiation perspective, pretty much, this is 2010. Once Facebook came to the table, and Facebook was already kind of reaching its heights of power, no one was ever going to negotiate against them. And Facebook was very much aware of, Facebook were amazing operators. They haven't built this business that they built without being as good operators as there is in the world. And they kind of knew, and so Snap2 got into this interesting situation where kind of, if you wanted to be part of this Facebook family, but like any founder and venture-backed business, you want to get the best outcome. Having Facebook come to the table is not necessarily the best thing.
I was going to ask that because I was going to say, do you tap in as you had LinkedIn or excuse me? Do you generally kind of tap them on the shoulder and say this is happening over here?
I certainly won't talk to the specifics of that deal, but I can just in debriefing with the founders and looking back at it, it's very hard to get competitive tension into an outcome when one of the competitors is Facebook.
Right.
Because there's not a lot of people. If Facebook wants something, they're going to buy it. And that's, except for Snapchat, that's pretty much true. And so price is not going to become an issue. So there's not a lot of point in someone getting in a bidding war with Facebook, and it's very hard to create one.
Right. So whatever they take, you say happy days.
No, look, there's leverage, but it's up to the founders and the decision makers. So Evan Spiegel said no. Looks like that was a pretty good no.
Yeah, it was.
Looks like it.
He spoke at Startup Grind, Silicon Valley. Yeah, in February. Yeah. Never talks. That was the founder of WhatsApp. $19 billion to Facebook. It's a pretty good day. Just came in like dirty sneakers and stuff too. He's a funny guy. True story. Acquisition from Facebook. You no longer have a job now. You said you weren't needed there.
Unemployed again.
Unemployed.
Unemployed again, and pretty happy. That was a. I think I'm allowed to say that was a script deal. So it was a share deal. So I'm the proud owner of some Facebook shares, which the certificate sits on my desktop. And I have no intention of ever selling
better than Uber shares. You got some of those too? Oh no.
I don't have any of them, but Facebook's public, so they weren't. This was pre-Facebook IPO, so that's pretty good.
So you're a good guy to know.
So I think my kids will have a college fund if there are still colleges when they go to.
Very cool. Very cool.
I hope. Please, Mark, keep it on track.
So was it back to Melbourne after this?
So
tell me more.
I'm still sort of back in Melbourne. I'm still doing back and forth. I'm spending, for tax purposes, about half my time in Melbourne. No, I was going where the work was. So I'm sort of helping out other businesses in Israel, businesses in Silicon Valley, and starting to meet founders in Australia. Because it kind of those. So listening to this very personal story, it's kind of obvious to think that the Australian tech scene is emerging, but I was totally oblivious to it. I'm living in Silicon Valley in Israel and coming to visit my family in Australia and kind of woke up one day with a pretty obvious thought, which is, this is probably unsustainable. I've got 2 kids, still under 3 years old, an amazing wife who works full-time or nearly full-time in a pretty serious job, and I'm kind of traveling a lot, having the time of my life, but and learning loads, but it's probably unsustainable. Partly because at some stage, these people are going to wake up and go, "This poor guy's a fraud. He doesn't really know what he's doing." And the other thing is, my wife's going to get really frustrated. I'm going to miss my kids, and sort of think about what am I going to do, and and started exploring the Australian tech scene. And this is sort of 2010, 2011. And
before you jump into that,
okay.
Yeah, because I know OpenTalk. I'm excited about OpenTalk. Where does that fit in?
So it was one of the companies I met out of San Francisco in this period. So OpenTalk's a really interesting company. We ended up selling it to Telefonica.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Totally coincidentally, but also the same team that bought Jar Jar, like literally the same individuals that bought Jar Jar. So it's kind of funny when one day I'm in the Jar Jar Mountain View office and the Telefonica team comes in, and I got to know them pretty well, and then must have been, whatever it was, 4 or 5 years later, I'm sitting in the San Francisco office and in trudges the Telefonica team and goes, I know that dude. And it was purely coincidental. So I then got about 100 calls from businesses saying, hey, you're the guy who can sell businesses to Telefonica, can you help us out? It's actually got nothing to do with me, but TalkBox is a really interesting company. They were very...
So can you explain to everyone?
So TalkBox is still around today as an independent, fully owned subsidiary of Telefonica. Anyone who's building anything to do with video should absolutely go and look them up. Someone's hand went up at the back. They
live streamed mobile to mobile was the kicker for me.
Wouldn't use the term live stream. So they are live interactive video, but embedded. So anyone who wants video as part of their mobile site, part of their website, part of their app, that wants it to be just integrated, push button, start video. So video chats or one-way video. It's the simplest and most reliable platform in the world to do that. So they were very early into WebRTC. It was initially Flash into WebRTC. They're powering some incredible services around the world around how do you actually, because video interaction, everyone, it's not just video calling, you have video conferences and everyone can say, oh, that's kind of, everyone nods and goes, that's a crappy experience, and it kind of generally has been, but they've actually figured out how to make this enterprise grade, reliable, high quality video in environments where it really needs to work, and it provides an amazing customer service. So, whether that's telehealth, financial services, broadcast. So a lot of the big broadcasters in the States are looking at doing, and in fact pioneering, so a lot of sports broadcasters do like live chat shows on mobile or online, and that video technology is actually relatively hard, even for broadcasters. So TalkBox built the OpenTalk platform in order to do that. And they went through, you talk about pivots. Pivots is an awful word, and the reason it's an awful word is because generally what happens is a company's going down a certain path, it's not working, and they go, what should we do now? And create a new startup, and they call it a pivot. And TalkBox did something slightly different. They said, well, this is really an interesting evolution. So it was a consumer service, a little bit like Jar Jar in its day. It said people want a video chat, but all this downloading apps and having walled garden solutions is really frustrating. Why can't I just send you a link to a website and we can video chat there? And that's how it started. It grew quite big, and then a whole lot of businesses came along and said, well, I'd like to do that too, but I don't want to do it just on the open web. I want to do it within my own environment. So they kind of created this idea of embedded communications. And then Telefonica came along and said, that's an amazing over-the-top telco service that lots of our customers, big and small, will want to be able to do. We want to kind of lock it up. So they bought that business and left it as a wholly operating subsidiary.
Right. Come back to Melbourne.
Probably more detail than you wanted.
No.
It's a great company.
Well, live streaming fans love it. Oh, not live streaming, sorry.
No, that's right. Live video.
Live video, sorry. So back to Melbourne. You got all this money in the bank, the share certificate sitting on the desk.
Unbankable.
Unbankable. Was the VC fund next? Where? No.
Oh,
close.
Yeah, well, look, it was. So I was working with advising and working really hands-on with a bunch of companies, starting to explore the Australian scene. And frankly, I kind of had this, and probably a lot of the room can, well, probably not relate to it actually, because you've all sort of got off your bums and started a business, but I kind of had this thing, I've lived in the valley, I've been in, spent a lot of time in Israel, everyone's got a startup idea, the taxi drivers have got startup ideas, the restaurant waiter has got a startup idea. I've seen some interesting stuff. Where's my startup idea? And I had a bit of cash, not a lot of cash, but a bit of cash and a bit of time. And I'm sort of driving around going, I think I'm going to start something.
Let's hear the pitch. I'm waiting to hear the pitch.
Well, and literally it was like, I'm driving around going, I'm going to invent a better, camera frame. I'm going to invent a better chair. And actually, sort of a little bit like your first question, two things dawned on me. The first thing is, I've got a really amazing life. And I don't actually see a lot of problems that I've got this burning desire to solve. Right? And so driving around thinking, I just want to be a founder, I just want to start something, is a really awkward starting point to start a business, and not a particularly effective one, especially when you don't know that much about stuff. So there was nothing burning in the gut. So I'm like, okay, well, I've got to, I don't have that much money, I'm going to earn a living, and I'm sort of, getting to know the Australian startup scene, and I'm meeting people. I'm still pretty active in the States, and people would start to come up and say, hey, you've had a couple of good experiences, you know some good people, can you introduce me to Sequoia? Can you introduce me to Andreessen Horowitz, or I'm still pretty active in the PR side, can you introduce me to TechCrunch? And the Silicon Valley mentality of pay it forward is a really powerful one. I think we're getting better in Australia. We've got a long way to go, and I believe in it very, very deeply. But I also believe that your networks are very important, and you protect your networks. So you don't protect your networks, you guard that relationship, because that's really your currency. And a lot of the people who were coming up, this is sort of 2011, 2012, and I hadn't maybe got as deep into the ecosystem as I should have, but they weren't that interesting. They weren't worth my personal capital to go, I'd love to help. So I was getting a bit frustrated, like, where are the interesting companies? I'm just going to have to keep flying to the Valley and flying to Israel, and that's okay, I'm really enjoying it. And I was sort of a bit resigned to that, but I started meeting more founders, and it kind of got to the point where people I was meeting were addressing some serious problems in the world, like some serious big problems in the world, and they were doing it in a really unique, clever way. And the people I was meeting were every bit as good as the people I was working with overseas. Right? We don't have the depth and we don't have the breadth, but the best of our talent is as good as anywhere in the world. I remain absolutely convinced of that. And so I'd say to them, what help are you getting, and where are you getting your money from? Because I assume you're getting a lot of investors coming to you. Because if they were in Tel Aviv or they were in Mountain View, there'd be investors at the door. And they're like, no, there's no money in Australia. But hang on a second, I know lots of people with lots of money. We've got one of the biggest, pension funds, our super funds in the world. There's loads of money in Australia. If you've got a mining plot that has a chance of finding some mineral, you're getting lots of money. If you've got a site where you want to build some kind of high-rise apartment building, there's lots of money. So there is no money in Australia. So I go and speak to people who have money. I said, what are you doing with your money? And they'd say, we're doing lots of property. We've got a lot of equities. It's in lots of mining stocks and banking stocks. Holding a bit of cash. I go, oh, that's great. What about tech? There's no good tech in Australia. This is in 2012. This is not that long ago, right? And so I was like, this is messed up. I know there's good tech, and they think there's no money, and I know there's good money, and they think there's no tech. And why aren't these things connecting? And I did what I think a lot of us in Australia do, and just sort of whinged about it for quite a long time. And this is frustrating, but I'm okay. And then a couple of things happened. A couple of things quite sort of serious from my perspective happened, and that was, it occurred to me, this is not my problem. This is our problem. This is a massive, massive, massive issue, because I see what's happening around the world. I see the investment and the infrastructure and the development that's going on to building tech ecosystems around the world. I'm in Australia right now, and I use the word ecosystem in 2012, and everyone goes, whatever, stop, you're up yourself. You've been in the Silicon Valley. You're in the. So we are falling very far behind. And I came back to Australia, to raise my family here. That's a big call, to do what I do and leave Silicon Valley to come to Australia. I feel pretty strongly about this being an amazing place to live, and it's under threat. It's under massive threat, because this lifestyle that I've enjoyed, a lot of us have enjoyed, have grown up with, or have migrated here for, is not sustainable anymore, because we are not going to continue to get as rich as we have got as a country from digging shit out of the ground and building shit on top of it. And that's the history of Australian wealth creation in a nutshell. There's some exceptions, but largely that's the wealth creation in Australia, and the world has changed. We've got to back our innovators, we've got to back our entrepreneurs. That's where wealth creation is going to come from. That's where jobs are going to come from. So this lifestyle that I fought so hard to have my family come and live in is under major threat. And then, so what do we do about it? Well, do we set up, and it was, when I say we, it was Jim Cassidy in particular, was my co-founder of Rampersand, and we were throwing and with a few others who've gone through this entrepreneurial journey, who've lived and worked in successful ecosystems, who've built successful companies. There's a whole bunch of companies we didn't touch on that kind of didn't do so well, but and learned a lot from them. Well, learned a lot more from them.
I'm interested in
we'll touch on that in a second, but the what do we do? Like, what's the best thing we can do to actually help? And we're reflecting on our journeys and what were the things that actually helped us and the businesses we were with, and capital is central to it. But capital is only a means to something else. The money is only a means to something. It's time to do stuff. And that stuff might be build more product, get more people, create new channels, build new networks, whatever that might be. So, a VC was kind of not the thing we started with. A VC was kind of the embodiment. Where we got to was, this is the vehicle through which we can do the most, have the highest impact. And that impact, we've talked about in three things. We say that impact is make a whole lot of money for people. And it sounds glib, but if we don't make a whole lot of money for people, there is no point in it, because you won't survive. This is not a charity. VC is most certainly not a charity, but actually proving to people you can make money out of this world. And there is good tech, there is good money, and VC is an elegant vehicle to bring the two together. To help in the creation of a successful generation of Australian founders. Right? So founders are heroes. They are the heroes. I mean, it wasn't that long ago when entrepreneur in Australia was still a term we used for Bond and Skase. Right? It was the dodgy guys who ran off to Mallorca and ripped us all over. That's changed very quickly, I'm pleased to say, but it wasn't that long ago. So the founders are the heroes. They're the inspiration, the beacon for the people who come after. And the third thing was to bring other people along on that journey, because we use this term ecosystem a lot. We have done for years, and now it's in vogue, which is great, but it's about recognising that ecosystems aren't built on tech and money, they're built on people. And not just founders and investors, but actually people who host events, HR people, sales people, accountants, lawyers, everything like that. And so we built Rampersand with those three things in mind, because that was the problem. We talk about I wanted to be a founder, but I didn't have a problem to solve. And now I kind of can relate more to founders, because that was a problem that burnt in our guts. Like, if we don't do this, then and no one does this, then Australia is doomed. Right?
Yeah, they go on television, they go on to San Francisco.
Why not?
Can I sidetrack and ask, just to talk about Jim for a little bit? So like in the marketing materials that I sent out to everyone here, I said that you and Jim are probably the smartest guys, I think, in VC in Australia.
Yeah. Tell that to Paul Bassett next month.
I will. And it'll be a slightly different story. No, but I can honestly say that, I met most of them. I think you guys and the guys from Airtree, just like smart operators, you know your stuff. Tell me about how you met Jim and the relationship there and
Jim
represent.
Yeah. So Jim's sister-in-law. This is very scientific how we met. Jim's sister-in-law and my sister-in-law are best friends, and I was on holidays with the sisters-in-law, and they did that thing, and it kind of a lot of tourists from some countries will say, "Oh, you're from," giving away. I was trying not to say which country, but when you're from Australia, you must know such and such, and you kind of go, "There's 23 people in
down the road." Yeah.
So yeah, it's on the way, halfway home, and they said, "Oh, you two are in tech. You should know each other. You'll get along famously." And we're both like, "There's many millions of people in tech. We don't all get along." So Jim's background is he's been involved in some of the largest tech businesses around the world, in growth, so IBM and Oracle, to name a couple. And he's been sort of head of regional head, fields marketing, services. I was showing off to him. We did that first meeting. I was showing off to him about been involved in a couple of businesses sold to Facebook and a couple of businesses sold to big telcos, and it's about $1.3 billion of exits. And he's going, "Oh, that's great." I was pretty proud. He's like, the last company I was involved in got bought by Oracle, got bought by private equity for $13 billion. Okay, so that's the kind of caliber of dude Jim is, and he's very, very experienced and worked in senior roles and lived and worked around the world. He's actually Scottish, but his wife is from Melbourne, and he dragged her around the planet. They'd had a very large exit in the business that he was in. He took some time off, and she said, "Well, it's my turn to choose. We're coming back to Melbourne." Sisters-in-law introduced us. We got together, and we both had noticed it was about he'd been back in Australia for about 3 or 4 months, and he'd pretty quickly got into the ecosystem already. And we both had this same thing. We sat down for coffee in Albert Park, and we was kind of just doing it as a tick box to keep our sisters-in-law happy. And we kind of sat there for about 4 hours and went like, we both want to solve the same problem. We had quite different views on how to do it, but we both wanted to solve the same problem. And the problem was how to bring the best founders success, give them an unfair chance of success, because if you only have a fair chance of success, you're going to fail, because most do. So how do we make it unfair? And that was when we started building the model. And so it took us probably 3 or 4 months to come to VC as the vehicle, and it took us another 3 or 4 months to put that vehicle structured together. And we thought you have to raise money for a VC. We put our own money into it, but you have to raise money for a VC. And, so it was just the two of us, and we sort of workshopped with 3 or 4 others, but it sort of came down to the two of us. And we went and spoke. We got an amazing network through some of our own, but also some of our close connections. And one guy in particular called Michael, who is my father, had worked in the one we talked about before. And he'd worked in.
Your father?
He's my father.
Yep.
Michael Naphtali. And he'd been in this role of supporting entrepreneurs for a long time, but he would come from a sort of more of a finance background. He was an M&A guy, right? He'd done deals. So he was advising us a lot, and he introduced us to people who might invest, and we sort of built out the fund. And in the meantime, we're looking at which companies we might want to invest in. So we found this company. So it's just Jim and I. We found this company, and we'd sort of done a lot of work on it. We decided we wanted to invest. So the story didn't quite happen this way, but it's a better story. And I turned to Jim and said, you've had all these successful businesses, you've bought and sold a bunch of tech businesses. Why don't you go away and write the term sheet? And Jim turned to me and said, you've just come back from the Valley, you've raised all this venture money, why don't you write the term sheet? I was like, neither of us know how to write a term sheet, do we? And that was a kind of a moment of reckoning. And so we went to my old man who'd done a lot of these deals, and he's like, well, actually, what we sort of realised is there's a whole bunch of things that goes into building a VC. Raising money is clearly one, but it's really what you're wanting to do with it. And you've got to be able to invest well. You've got to be able to find the best businesses, convince them that they want your money, because in a good market, it's a competitive environment. So we're going to add value to your business, and we have to know how to invest well and structure it and and do all the right term sheets and documents and whatever. So we actually end up building a partnership of 5 of us. Jim and I sort of manage the fund, and we are mostly responsible for going out and finding and working with the best, with the founders and the teams that we want to invest in. And then we have the other 3 partners who collectively come from a sort of legal, M&A, corporate finance kind of background, who add a huge amount of value in not just the mechanics of a fund of actually investing, but also have built and run some very large businesses outside of the tech sector. So sometimes we get really blinkered in tech and think we're really unique, we're really different, and everyone who's gone before is sort of irrelevant. But the fact is there's loads and loads of lessons, so we've got to bring those lessons to the table. And so we've created this vehicle that can do what we want it to do it in a way that's probably not traditional VC. It's actually product of the 2 halves.
I'll take a few questions because I mentioned some of this, what I was going to ask you about what you're looking for in startups and stuff will probably be covered here. Is there any area where you think your firm adds unique or disproportionate value? All right, both 7.
That's my favourite question. Look, there's a couple of answers. What we run within Rampersand, we have a bunch of shared services. So these are things that are designed. We house within the fund that actually is designed to help the businesses that we invest in, and it's all part of giving this unfair chance of success. So because of our background in business building, in PR, marketing, sales, growth, expanding internationally, building brand, market research, so a lot of these sort of marketing functions, we've done those roles, and we know how to find good people in those roles, and we employ some good people in those roles within the fund. And so that's the service that's available to the people that we invest in. And it's not to say that if we invest in a company they have to use these, but it's to say that we actually understand these processes and have sourced them. You're going to have to probably buy them anyway, in many cases. And so why don't we make it more efficient, more curated, and ready for service? So a lot of our companies do utilise that. Sometimes it's to help them buy, fill in a gap, or we can buy it. We went out initially when we launched our first fund, and we said, hey, we've got this PR and sales and marketing background, and we had a whole bunch of people come up to us and say, oh, that's awesome, because we're really terrible at those things, and you'll do it for us. And I just want to clarify, that's not what we do. We are not there to supplement a founding team that doesn't have that capability. We're there to amplify. So that is something that it's not a normal path to VCs to come out of sort of advertising and PR and sales and marketing. Yeah. So we do have that very practical hands-on experience. We do roll the sleeves up and do that. So I think that's sort of probably a relatively unique point of difference. The other side is the one I just talked about, is the people who are not from the tech background, who've got many, many years and decades of experience in doing deals, in raising capital, in creating exits and managing those things. So we talk about we talk about 3 areas of support. And broadly speaking, pretty much every company needs these. We talk about growth, which is the marketing kind of stuff we talked about. People, so that's finding great people. And one of the things that a lot of companies have trouble is scaling their team. So how do we actually plan to scale the team? What's an organisational structure that will scale? And leadership development. For those founders, and getting a business from 0 to 1 is really hard. From 1 to 10 is really hard. From 10 to 100 is really hard. And there's often different skills that are required. And we back founders. We don't want to be that kind of VC that says, well, you've hit your use-by date. Here comes the professional management team. We want to help nurture and develop the leaders of that business. So it's growth, it's people, and it's capital. So actually helping, raising money is a kind of a tough process. It's a very distracting process. Running an M&A process is very difficult. So we've got a lot of experience around those things. We don't go out and say to our companies, hey, we'll go and raise the money for you. That's not what we are. We're not a corporate advisory. But we do have a lot of experience, and we can sort of help structure and protect the founders. Because one of the truisms of raising money, and especially in an early stage business, is typically, there's 2 founders, let's say, and they're the most important people in that business for driving revenue. And they're exactly the same 2 people leave the business to go and raise money at exactly the time you want your numbers going up and to the right. It's actually a very difficult process, and a lot of you gone through it, and we try to make that process as easy as possible, both in when we invest, but also for follow-on rounds. So sort of trying to protect. So I don't know if that's better or worse than other funds, but certainly the way we think about things.
I can't see it there yet. What do you look for? I guess it's the question. I'm going to just jump in. 8 votes. What do you look for in a startup? I think that's the question I get most when we're talking to a VC. What are you looking for? How can I, prep the deck or whatever, make sure I'm ticking the boxes for Rampersand?
It's hard. There is no answer to that question. But I'll tell you what I think is the most useful answer. And I've sort of alluded to it a little bit already tonight. What we're looking for is people who are solving real problems. These problems are very real, and potentially many people have them, and they have a unique solution. So at a high level, that's kind of what every VC is looking for, right? What we then look for is the people who we think have the best insight and unnatural capability to solve that problem and to build a business. And the reason we talk about the problem, not the solution, and the problem first of all, is almost certainly the solution that's been built when the company comes and pitches Rampersand is not the solution that's going to make that business very successful. It might get them off the ground, it might be a really successful product, but it's not going to survive forever. It's got to be the evolution of that product. And so if people fall in love with that product and are pitching us on that product, then there's a very real danger that product becomes stale very quickly and there's no follow-up. Right? So the people who are really obsessive about solving that problem are the ones that we really like. So when you're pitching Rampersand, I think it's pretty common now, people talk about lines, not dots. So what that means is we want to build a relationship. We're investing in people. We are founder-led, not idea-led. So what that means is there are lots of businesses that can come in that are solving big problems that I've talked about, that we really like, and it's a really great idea, but we really want to back the people who we see, and we spend a lot of time in understanding what are the kinds of personality traits and what are the combination of personality traits that are going to be successful, that are going to be huge success. And I'm reasonably vocal and well quoted about we want to back kind of crazy people, because success, huge success, the kind of success that a VC wants is not normal. It's not normal. And so therefore, kind of by definition, we're looking for people who are not normal. And those people manifest in we call it we call it pursuit of the weird. We use weird in a really positive way. And not everyone takes it that way, but that's exactly how we use silly in a positive way and we use weird in a positive way. We're looking for people who are weird, we're outliers and not normal. People who are very sensible tend not to do really well in startups, because it's very easy to convince yourself not to do this life. It's a bloody hard life and your chances of success are very, very low. So we're looking for people with a pretty unique psychological makeup. The best description we've come up with is we're looking for people who are pathologically optimistic, because you've got to be optimistic to do this. You've got to believe that what you're going to do is going to succeed. All the data tells you that you're going to fail, but you nonetheless believe you're going to succeed. So you're pathologically optimistic, but you're also pathologically paranoid. And those two pathologicals tend not to manifest in the same person. But that's kind of our experience, is that's the kind of person. Because if you're too optimistic, you just drive off the end of the cliff. Oh, everything's wonderful. No, I've got no money. It doesn't matter. The next sale will come. I'm sure that people want this. I'm just one good coverage piece on Startup Smart and I'll be a success. You got to actually be paranoid and optimistic. You got to have a passion for that problem.
I don't think Startup Smart's going to do it for them.
Hey,
Sorry, can you look?
trying to support. I was going to say TechCrunch, but I want to support the local media.
Okay. We'll get there.
Startup Daily.
Sydney. Yeah, Sydney. We don't know about it. Yeah.
So, hey, we don't believe in the Sydney-Melbourne wars either, by the way. This is for
South
Australia.
Yeah.
But it is so the lines not dots is about saying we want to create relationships with those people, because you can't assess people in one meeting and one pitch. We are not, and we're not particularly good at when someone comes in for the first time and we love what they're doing to just say, okay, at the end of it, here's a term sheet. We don't work that way. Some VCs do, and there's nothing wrong with it. That's not the way we want to do it, because we think we're going to play a role in your future, and you're got to know who's coming into your company. It's your company we're buying into. It's not sort of you're not sort of the grateful recipient of our check. We're coming into your company. You're letting us into your company, and you've got to know who we are, and we've got to know who you are in order to be able to do that. And I think what's really exciting, just to go off on a tangent for what was really exciting in the last few years. So we launched our first fund in August 2013. It was our second fund a year ago yesterday, actually. No, a year ago today. It's a 1 year anniversary of our second fund.
Cool.
And what's happened in that time is really significant, and that balance of power between the VCs and the startups is really starting to normalise. It's not quite there yet. We need a lot more money. We need a lot more opportunities, a lot more complementary investors to support companies. But we're starting to see people who are coming in. Yes, everyone wants to pitch a founder. Everyone wants to pitch a VC, and I kind of get that, and that's really exciting. But the best companies, we're lucky to be a part of that. We need the founders as much as the founders need the money. So it's our job to really prove that we can add value to your organisation, that we can support you as you grow, that we can get the hell out of the way when that's the best thing to do, and let you run your own business. So what we're looking for in businesses is all the things I've just talked about, and people who actually really they see that future. I've got such a lucky job. I get to see people who see the future. I look into their eyes and go, do they really believe it? Is this future going to happen? No matter what? Is they going to break down walls to make that future happen? And they're going to figure out which walls to jump over, which walls to break down, and which walls to go around. And that's that's a great opportunity for me. That's what we're looking for. In terms of practicality, when someone pitches Rampersand, there are kind of 5 things you want to see. You want to see who the person is and what's the background, why they're solving this problem, why they're drawn to this problem, how far they've got, and what have they achieved so far.
Does that matter what stage, sir?
Yeah, we're an early stage fund. We call it a post-seed fund, so we want them in market. And we toy with how early that means, and everyone says how much traction is the right amount of traction, or how much revenue. There isn't, unfortunately, an elegant answer to that. We're kind of looking for
There's customers.
Organisations that have got, but customers that have been acquired and sort of understand how and why. That's kind of the threshold, and sometimes businesses can come with millions of dollars of revenue, but they don't know the answer to that question. And sometimes they can come with tens of thousands, and they do. So it's not a revenue threshold. It's actually an awareness of your own business and what are the levers within the business that you're going to pull. And we're not looking for perfect companies by any stretch. We don't know what our full go-to-market is going to look like. We don't know exactly how if we put $1 into sales, we're going to we're going to get $10 out. That's we're well before that. That's Series B kind of companies. But we want founders who've sort of starting to get a feel for what their market is and what their business is going to look like. So we want to know who the founders are, why they're solving the problem, what the problem is, and what they know about it, and what's their unique solution to that problem, how far they've come to date, and where they're going to go. And that can be a 5-page deck. We're really happy with that. We like that. It can be a 10-page deck. It probably shouldn't be a 50-page deck. We probably won't struggle to get to that. But that information is really important to us. And the first one, which is about the people, is the most important one. And that's something that, as I said before, we take some time to get to know.
The one how do you differentiate between a startup and a new business venture? Do VCs invest in business ventures which are not as risky as startups but have a low ROI?
No, they're called bank loans. Look, and that's a pretty glib answer. We are looking for returns. Australia is a really exciting market because we shouldn't underestimate how important Atlassian has been to this market. Atlassian has been enormously important to be able to show all of us in this room and those who hadn't even thought about that you can build a bloody big business without having to leave this country, or at least Scott and Mike are still kind of based in Sydney, and that we can dare to dream and do that. And we've got a whole bunch of companies, Aconex, 99 Designs, Campaign Monitor. There's a whole bunch of companies coming through Canva that are really, really exciting, and this is now the art of the possible. And we think strongly that there's no reason why Australia can't be the home of many, many billion-dollar valuation businesses. There's no question that that's true. There is also no question that we haven't built very many of them yet. And so for a VC thesis, it's got to be kind of, we can make a lot of money and do all the things that remember, it's not all about making money, but it's a critical part of it. We can make a lot of money off businesses when they get to $100 million valuations. Right, so the question was around that aren't as risky. Risk and reward go together, of course, but I'm okay with sort of relatively low risk, because for us, we view risk very, very differently the way perhaps that question is intended. We view risk in terms of through a VC lens. But the ROI part of that question is very troubling. Like we can't deal with an investment that doesn't create an ROI for us, because there's not a lot of point. That's what we exist for. Our investors, we are accountable to our investors the same as founders are accountable to theirs. They invest in VC because they want to make a lot of money. And so if we don't, there ain't no point.
This is a question comes up quite a bit with the VCs. And this is pretty much a really good question for you guys, given the marketing background. Do you look at teams that are non-technical? I mean, I like the idea that Mark Suster is about you can hire your first, your CTO.
Yes.
Maybe that's because I'm from a non-technical background.
Yeah, and look, and so am I, and so we're sort of we are conscious of that. It's very hard to invest in a technology team where you believe that technology is their differentiator, but they don't know how to build it. It's very, very hard. So, the question is not necessarily whether they've got a full-time CTO. The question is, do they have a capability to own and grow and maintain a sustainable competitive advantage from that technology? If that technology is built by an external agency with no technical people within the team, it's very, very difficult to invest in that organisation. Because remember, we're not investing for how good they are today, we're investing in how good they are going to be in a year, 5 years, 10 years' time. And so, can they get an MVP off the ground built by an external and then hire a CTO to figure it out? Look, possibly they can. We have certainly invested in teams that did not have a technical founder. We have done that, and we will do it again. But they've got to overcome that threshold of do they understand how to build the thing that is so important, that drives the thesis that we're investing in. So they're extraordinary people who've been able to do that and to convince us of that. And the ones that we've done have gone on to be very good.
Cool. I'll leave this one, the last one was at number 4 up, but can you tell us how your firm makes decisions? No, I'll leave that.
Why did I tell you that? Because we actually...
Didn't you kind of cover it? No, go.
Well, that was what we look for. I'll tell you about our process, and this is probably going to be a bit boring for those who aren't about to come to the process, but one of our core principles is transparency. So we've actually written a reasonable amount about our process, and go on to Medium and you'll see the stuff we've written. It's demystifying VC is very much a strong part of the thesis, because this shouldn't be a mystery. This should be, if you're a good fit for us and we're a good fit for you, let's meet. If we're not, figure it out quickly and move on to the next guys. So we're quite public about what are we looking for. There's a question up there, what sectors? Basically anything in technology where it's a big problem and technology is part of the enabling solution. It's kind of as simple as that. Our boundaries, we don't do medical tech, we don't do medical devices, we don't do bio. So our process is relatively simple. We've got a few gating points. Come in and pitch or build a relationship with either Jim, myself, or Vanessa or Eloise, who work in our investment analysis team and investment management team, and we will build that relationship. We will take a view at that very immediate point. We believe in fast no's, not slow yeses, because back to time being of the essence. If we think you're either not quite right for us yet, but might be and you're interesting, we'll put you onto a watch list, and we maintain a very active watch list. There's about 45 companies on it at the moment. Or we'll go into further exploration, or we will say, no, we don't think you're a good fit with Rampersand. And then there's basically 3 steps. We'll do some light DD as we get to know you and the business. We'll then start to craft a more formal DD, which is relatively lightweight and sort of somewhat technical. Does the business exist? Is the IP protected? The contract's there? And then it's a sort of decision point. So we really work very hard to make that process as quick as possible, but it's generally a sort of 6 to 8 week process. Can be quick. We've done an investment in 2 weeks. But that investment we did in 2 weeks, I'd known the founder for about 4 years and had tracked them. So from the point of sort of formally pitching to check, it was 2 weeks. But you could say we've done 4 years of DD on the business because it's about people. So we try and gate it in that way, and we want to know sort of when you first come in and we get to build that relationship. We really, that first phase is getting to understand what you're like as a founding team, what are your dynamics like, what problems have you overcome. I can say, when people say when is the right time to approach the fund, the answer is get early, come in early, because there's no right time, there's no perfect time. You're never in the best shape you'll ever be in to invest, to get invested. We want to build that relationship. So some of the, we've invested in a company called Assembly. It used to be called Promise Pay. We met the founders of Promise Pay, I think it was August 2013, and we invested in January 2015. And that was a long period of time. And what happened is we saw how they overcame a whole lot of problems. They were pre-MVP when we first met them, right? And they brought a product to market which was very different to the product that they had originally told us about. Then they evolved that product, so we got to see all kinds of stuff that they were able to deal with, and we could convince ourselves of their capabilities. So all they had to do was get the first customer on the new product. We're away. We wrote the check. They had next to no revenue. So actually come in and build a relationship. Now, from our perspective, that's quite hard to scale. We're a small team. There's only the 4 of us in active investing mode. So we're not going to be able to go and spend hours and hours with everyone, but we want to have those touch points. Put us on your mailing list. We get a lot of companies who say, we get a lot of emails addressed to dear current and future investor. And we read them. I promise you we read them all. Our emails are on the website. Our phone numbers are on the website. They're there because we want to make a point that there is no barriers between VC and founders. Although I would encourage you probably to say calling's hard. I spend 12 hours a day in meetings. It's hard and likely to get through, but it's available. So come in, let us know how you're going. Be open, be honest. Tell us about the bad things, because actually the overcoming of those bad things, it is more compelling for us than how well things are going. Anyone can sort of luck on things going well. Very few people can overcome the barriers that are going to come, because the one thing we know when we invest is the plan that we've invested in is not the right one. We don't know what the right one looks like, but we know what that one's wrong, because there's an expression. It was a German military strategist who said everyone has a plan. No battle plan survives the first shot. And someone knows who it is.
It's von Clausewitz.
That's who it is. Thank you.
I knew that too.
Yeah. And then, but one that's much easier for me to remember is then Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson,
yeah. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Yeah, that's right. So you're going to get punched in the face. You're going to get punched in the face a lot. Yeah, and how you recover from that is actually the key determinant, or a key determinant for success. So that's what we're looking for. So we get these wonderful investor updates. Everything's up and to the right, and everything we've done has always worked, and we've never tried anything that didn't work. We can't invest in that, right? Because that luck's going to run out, and you're not going to know what the hell to do when that runs out. Either that, or you're pathologically dishonest. There's hustle and there's full dishonesty. Hustle's all right. Does that answer the question? I can't remember what the original question was.
Does. I want everyone back on their feet.
Hey, mate.
And a big thank you to Paul for coming tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.